Hello everyone, Sullivan Bard here, or you can call me Sully. Well, in continuing with Sulli-Ween, I have to say that it would seem odd for me to talk about mummies during Halloween.
I mean, it's mostly because I don't see how they're associated with the holiday. They don't seem scary and are more based on reality than fiction. But seeing them as basically Egyptian zombies with intelligence and being more part of the Universal Monster series, it actually makes sense why Halloween's a part of them, and that they expanded outside the Universal classic movies.
And speaking of Universal, that's exactly what I'm here to talk about.
Yes, there is the original Mummy from 1932 starring Boris Karloff, which has its own Universal series, and the Hammer Horror Mummy from 1959 starring Christopher Lee, which also has its own movie series. And you may think that I would compare and contrast these two movies, but I haven't seen them, so I can't make comparisons to them.
Yet, there is also another mummy movie that came out in 1999, and that is also by Universal.
It stars Brendan Fraser and spawned two sequels, a spin-off with its own sequels, and attractions at Universal theme parks.
Yeah, that is quite something. But then, there's another mummy movie from Universal, but in 2017.
And this one stars Tom Cruise and was to be the beginning of Universal's own cinematic universe, calling it Dark Universe. Which is odd because Universal released The Wolfman back in 2010 and that didn't start any cinematic universe, so what's the deal there? Regardless, Dark Universe was Universal's attempt to do a monster cinematic universe like they did in the 30s and 40s with Dracula, Frankenstein, and Wolfman, but with remakes of those classics. But with their first entry having been criticized for copying Marvel's cinematic universe and for cramming in too much too soon, it bombed at the box office. Yet I heard plans for future movies from the series are in the works, with Invisible Man starring Johnny Depp being next. But The Mummy with Brendan Fraser is more of its own thing and also more beloved.
And to be perfectly honest, I don't get it. Like, I can see where people are coming from when they say they hate this but love this, but I'm a rare minority who thinks the opposite. I actually like this one more over this one. And yes, I was going to do a compare and contrast of these two movies, but since the Brendan Fraser one was boring and forgettable to me, there wasn't much in it that stand out over the Tom Cruise one. So I'm gonna do what I did with Charlotte's Web and Anastasia, by reviewing the remake, or fourth reboot, but still make pointers to the original, or in this case, third reboot. So let's begin.
An army soldier named Nick Morton is in Iraq with his partner, Sergeant Chris Vale, to find and take a treasure on a map called Haram to be delivered to someone named Henry. Upon reaching the location, the two men call for an airstrike as they're under attack by terrorists. Yet the strike revealed an underground entrance to an ancient Egyptian tomb, and archaeologist, Jenny Housey, goes with Nick and Chris into the tomb, as Jenny said Nick stole the map she was going to use, since the two had slept together the other night. But the three soon find a tomb to hold a sarcophagus held under mercury, and they bring it up to be taken on a plane to London. Yet disaster occurs as a murder of crows brings the plane down, letting Nick to save Jenny, but as the plane crashes, Nick is the only survivor, as taking the sarcophagus unleashes a curse put on him by Amenet, an ancient Egyptian princess who chose Nick to take part in a ritual that allows an evil force to take his body. So Nick, along with Jenny, try to figure out how to stop the curse, as Jenny's boss, who happens to be Dr. Henry Jekyll, has a solution that both Nick and Jenny have a disagreement on.
Now, even though I find the Brendan Fraser version to be boring and forgettable, there are a couple of parts in it that I do like about it. But they can't hold up to the Tom Cruise one, which I found to have improvements on.
Firstly, I found Tom Cruise in the new one to be enjoyable, in some parts, even though I'm not a fan of him and didn't see anything from him that stood out to me and I like. But with The Mummy, he seems to be fun in this. Of course, he has his action scenes that he's best known for, yet for the times when he acts, I can see and understand where he's going with it, as the scenes do call for them. Where with Brendan Fraser, playing Rick O'Connell, he's only okay on occasion. Some of his dialogue I do like for how he says them, but he doesn't come across as charming as his attitude feels a little off to me. And I can say the same thing for all the other films he's been in. So Tom pretty much stands out in his version. The supporting cast couldn't be any more different. The new one has Annabelle Wallis, Jake Johnson, Marwan Kenzari, and Russell Crowe. Each one I found to be fun in their own right. Wallace has some nice qualities, Johnson has a couple of good moments, even when doing that flashlight bit with Cruz that made me laugh. Ken Zari, as brief as his time is, gets a fight scene with Wallace, which is nice. Even to having the Book of the Dead from the Fraser mummy make an appearance is kind of cool. But it's interesting to know that Ken Zari went on to star as Jafar in the live-action Aladdin movie, so at least he's getting more attention than being in a small role. And Russell Crowe is so unexpected as Jekyll that I actually like it. And Crowe is not only one of my favorite actors, but Jekyll is one of my favorite characters in this movie. And yes, being named Jekyll, he does become Hyde, and boy, is he a lot of fun in this one. Yeah, the makeup isn't much, but his performance is what makes it work, for being more hammy than his other roles, and even calling himself as Eddie Hyde at one point. He's just that enjoyable. But the old one is a different story. It stars Rachel Weisz, John Hannah, Kevin O'Connor, Jonathan Hyde, just to name a few. And I do mean a few because there's one too many characters in this film. Too many for me to go over and even to like or care about. They do have their own comedic moments, even though a couple of them are the comic relief, but I didn't get myself interested in them as there's nothing too interesting about them. So yes, I do like the support in the new one. But then there's The Mummy, and both versions have neat things to talk about. Yet the new one is quite something, and it's not because the mummy is female, but because she's enjoyable and also kind of good looking. She presents a kind of intimidating look, by having markings on her body and 2 pupils in each eye. That's kind of neat. She does speak Egyptian, and subtitles are presented, but the times when she speaks English, it's only, from how I see it, telepathic between 2 characters speaking Egyptian. Which may sound confusing, but it's more understandable if you've seen it, 'cause I can't best interpret it. However, the old one is definitely different. Named Imhotep, a classic name for sure, and played by Arnold Vosloo, is half the time alright. He has a sinister look about him and is a more good-looking villain. But he only speaks Egyptian, which is fine, but his translations are very inconsistent. Sometimes it's subtitled, sometimes someone will translate what he said, and sometimes it's never translated at all. So, in this sense, I do enjoy Imhotep in some degree, but I prefer Omnet for being interesting in many areas. How about the effects? Well, the old one does seem dated and not impressive, but I would say that it's more of its own style and sometimes alright. The opening shots look beautiful, Imhotep's regeneration, while dated, is kind of cool, and at least I didn't laugh at it. And all the rest is just as they are. Cool looking at times, but very dated in many parts. Even the faces in the sand don't look like the villain they're supposed to. The new one updated the effects, and they also blend well into dark areas. And Omnet's regeneration is very neat, and it did look and feel realistic. Even her face in the sand is more detailed. But the mercury does look fake. Looks more of a watery liquid than a metal liquid. And yeah, mercury is like that in reality and vice versa, but I don't buy it here, especially when it moves around. So, in comparison to the two, I like the new effects a little more, yet as dated as the old ones are, they're at least an honorary mention. But for the movie as a whole, the new one kicks the old one out of the park. Even though it does build an extended universe by including not just Jekyll, but also the creature from the Black Lagoon's arm, Dracula's skull, which could be any vampire and not just Dracula, and a giant squid, for some reason. Did it appear in any Universal monster flick? But the Mummy story itself is kept simple. The old one not only does repeats of some bits, but there's also too much information for me to get into. There's these scarabs that devour flesh slowly over time, even though they're shown to eat in a matter of seconds, so why did the movie say they eat very slowly? Imhotep's love, Ankhsenamen, has her vital organs placed in jars, which does offer reasons for him to go after them and suck out the life of the men who took him. But how this all came about and onward is so detailed that it mostly becomes forgettable. There's the Book of the Dead that brings Imhotep back to life as immortal. There's the group finding Hamunaptra, the city of the dead. The 7 plagues of Egypt appear. There's another book that makes Imhotep mortal. The Egyptians curse Imhotep, yet he wants his love reborn by sacrificing another woman. And I'm just getting bored by all of this cluttered mess. The new one is simply straightforward. Omnet is to be the new heir of Egypt. But once her newborn brother gets to be the next heir, Omnet summons the god of death, Set, to give her power to not only kill her father and brother, but to perform a ritual on a man she chose by stabbing him with a dagger that Set gave her, as it will allow Set to enter a human body. Of course, murdering the pharaoh and his son has Omnet be mummified alive, unknowingly that she already cursed herself. And all of that made sense why she's after Nick. and how she gets in his head to lead him to her, and the cop she sucked the life out of came to life at her command, and knowing what only two relics are, being the dagger and stone, are all sort of a fun detail. It didn't need a lot of characters, and it didn't need a lot of items to get, and it didn't need any plagues, which offer very little. All it needed was a simple storyline and premise, and all that happens I can actually get behind and fully understand. Not to mention have a whole lot of fun as well, even homaging an American Werewolf in London, with Chris, who became cursed as a living ghost, where earlier on, he was bitten by a spider that left him as a zombie and died by Nick. And yeah, both movies focus as being action-adventure than horror, but still have horror elements in them. But the problem is, to me, that the old one is boring and forgettable, and has too much going for it as its own thing. Even being directed by Stephen Sommers, who hasn't yet impressed me with what he directed in the 90s. He even directed Van Helsing, which ironically plays up the Universal Monster mashup, and that went nowhere. So, in full disclosure, the new Mummy with Tom Cruise is really for me. It's enjoyable, fun, and simple. Nothing more. And the actors playing their characters did a nice job. Tom Cruise plays Nick Morton, Annabelle Wallis plays Jenny Housey, Sophia Boutella plays Aminette, Jake Johnson plays Sergeant Chris Vale, Courtney B. Vance plays Colonel Greenway, Marwan Kenzari plays Malik, and Russell Crowe plays Dr. Henry Jekyll and Mr. Edward Hyde. As a whole, the Tom Cruise Mummy movie is enjoyable and kind of fun. The characters are nice, the story is simple and fun, and the effects are neat and again fun. Director Alex Kurtzman did a good job of updating the Mummy movies, but with also mixing elements of An American Werewolf in London, the Brendan Fraser version, and also updates of the classic Universal monsters. But only a little, as this is the first film for the Dark Universe. Sure, it's going for a Marvel-style treatment and has a lot going for it, but I see it as a good startup to rebooting a franchise that Universal originated, as talks of more are coming soon and I hope to check them out when they do. But whatever the case, if this is the only film there is, I'll still enjoy it more over the Brendan Fraser one any day. And while a couple bits in that one are okay and do fine on their own, I personally prefer the new over the old, for being simple on the Mummy story, but still a fun film throughout, including the universe building.
So today, this movie we give a rating of 3 stars. So thank you for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, support me on Patreon, and until next time, for more of Sulli-Ween.
Oh, and in case you're wondering, The Mummy with Brendan Fraser gets the rating of 2.5 - stars. And that is it. See you soon.